You are listening to the Cattle Call Podcast. This is the place where computer-aided design and drafting meets humor and practicality, with a touch of business acumen thrown in for fun. Jim and Rocco, the owners of Zentech Consultants, the premier U.S. technology consulting firm for architecture, engineering, construction, and manufacturing, discuss the fascinating world of CAD with some humor and some honesty. The Cattle Call Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Cattle Call Podcast with Jim and Rocco from Zentech Consultants. I am Jim, your irrationally loud host, and with me, as always, is my partner,
Rocco, the tall, dark, and handsome one.
Oh, really, dude, the delusion. You got to lay off the acid. That stuff is bad for your brain. He's none of those things, folks. But I am still loud. But it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, no matter how tall, dark, or handsome he thinks he is, he still has to suffer through the engineering joke of the week. Okay, Rocco, I got a good one for you today. You ready for this?
I'm ready.
You're ready. Okay, so a priest, a doctor, and an engineer go golfing one morning, and they get caught behind this really, really slow group of golfers. So the priest, he waves down the greenskeeper, and he says, "Hey, man, what's wrong with that group ahead of us? They're just crazy slow." And the greenskeeper tells him, he says, "Oh, that's a group of blind firemen. They lost their sight saving our clubhouse from a fire last year, so we always let them play for free anytime they like." And the priest goes, "Oh my goodness," and he crosses himself and he says, "That's so sad. I'll say a special prayer for them tonight." And the doctor goes, "Oh my goodness, they're heroes. I'm going to contact my ophthalmologist colleague and see if there's anything he can do for them." And the engineer looks at the greenskeeper and goes, "Why the hell don't you just let them play at night?" There you go. Hey, look at that. I got one that Rocco actually enjoyed. So that gets a little, there we go. Put a drum roll behind that. That was good. I actually like that one. That one made me laugh out loud.
It is a good one.
What are we talking about today, Rocco? Oh, I know. So on today's show, I want to talk about the pros and cons of subscription software licenses and the effect that they're having on the AEC industry. And look, the truth is that my opinion here, it doesn't really matter too much, kind of like in my marriage. No one cares what I have to say. The large software developers have all gotten together and they have determined that they can get crazy amounts of renewable annual income just by refusing to sell perpetual licenses of their systems, and then they just make us all pay annual subscriptions. And the truth is, like I said, the amount of money that they are making means that nothing we say or do on this insignificant podcast is even going to be a blip on anybody's radar. But I know that there is still a lot of frustration out there from these changes. And what I actually want to do today, which it may not sound like right now, but I promise I do. I want to point out that this subscription model is not always all bad. The developers do at least give a nod, at least in the direction of convenience for their customers, even if their main driver is just profits. And look, just in case you guys want a metric, all right, on how powerful the annual subscription model is for a company, in 2015. Just before they moved to a subscription-based model, Autodesk's stock price was about $50 per share, and that was the highest it had ever been in its 30-year history.
I remember that.
Yeah. In 2021, they peaked at $324 a share, and it is still hovering today in around the $250 per share range. Okay. The truth of the matter is annual subscriptions equals high revenues. And no company's going to let that kind of money go away anytime soon. So Rocco, this isn't new, right? We've talked about this on the show a few years back. And I think I kind of want to ask you the same question I did then and see if the answer has changed. Do people see the benefits of annual licensing, or are they just frustrated and annoyed by the lack of perpetual options?
I think it's becoming more of an acceptance factor, right? I mean, you don't have any choice, So if you look at a company like Autodesk, for example, I mean, they are doing a good job of really getting the word out as to what's being added and improved. And so I think people are starting to see the value in it. I think, but it is more of an acceptance. I mean, if you want to be current, you gotta pay the money,
Yeah.
So I think that, people are not as irate about it as they were.
It's kind of like listening to my engineering joke of the week. If you want to listen to the podcast, you got to suffer through it. It is what it is.
Yep.
But eventually you do hit a funny joke now and then. So, I listen, I understand the frustration that people may still hold, right? Once upon a time, we could go out and we could buy a piece of software and we could use it for years or even a decade before we really had to think about upgrading and retraining our staff. And you just can't do that anymore. Like Rocco was saying, if you don't pay these annual fees, your software is just going to stop working. So you need to pay it, right? Even if you don't upgrade to the newest version, you still got to pay that annual fee. And not only that, but most of the modern software will only work one or two releases back, right? So you really can't go more than 2 years for most software systems now without upgrading. You have to. You have to upgrade your systems and your processes, even, unfortunately, if you don't see any immediate benefit in that current release. And yeah, it's a strong arm tactic that's annoyed a lot of people, and myself among them. But like I said, it's actually not without its benefits as well. From a technology standpoint, I think in the modern design build world, you can't really be a competitive company if you are 5 or more years behind on the current technology use, right? The industry is just changing way too fast for that. If you don't keep your staff, using and proficient with the latest and greatest tech, your competitors are just going to bury you. The annual subscription model, right? It forces companies that might otherwise lean towards overly conservative investments in their technology training and their software upgrades. It forces them to invest in those tech processes. And honestly, I think in that light, if you look at it that way, it has probably helped a lot of companies stay afloat that might otherwise have gone under. And here at Zentech, we work with a lot of companies, both, very, very small and very, very large. And what I've seen is that a lot of the very small, I guess we'll call it like 2 to 10 person, design build type shops that we deal with, who are desperately far behind the tech curve and that are still clinging and holding on to those old perpetual licenses that they bought back in like 2014, 15, and 16. They all have one thing in common. Those 2 and 10 people shops used to be much bigger than that. Okay. By the time they get to working with me to try and move things forward, they are in a state where they are frantically trying to catch up to modern technology, and they have to invest a whole lot of cash in buying new seats, getting up to speed, training, configuring, customizing, getting it to work where they should have already been. So, Rocco, what industries do you see that are still trying to cling onto those kind of like out-of-date perpetual software systems? And in working with them, what have you seen as like kind of what are the good and the bad results of holding on to that?
Yeah, I think it's more, let's say, the smaller architectural firms and your smaller survey firms, and again, without not picking on anybody specific, right? I mean, we're small business owners too, so we certainly understand the cost of running a business and trying to keep those costs low. But to your point, it's it's an unnecessary. It is a yeah. You just have to spend the money to stay current. The further behind you get, the more painful it becomes when you need to make that move. And the other reality is that there are significant improvements in technology that can really help your overall productivity. So to ignore those for the sake of saving a few dollars, I think it just hurts you in the long run.
Yeah, I agree 100%, and look, I understand that people get angry when they feel that they're being forced to, pay for something that they don't feel they need today. And regular listeners of the podcast have heard me complain loudly about the cost and the issues of annual subscription on the show many times. I do get it. We all want to buy something once and then forget about it. And that is just not the way that technology works. You're not buying a car that you can just maintain for 40 years. It doesn't happen like that with tech. As frustrating as it is, it costs these companies, right, the software developers, a lot of money to research and plan and code and develop and then market, these large scale software systems. And it really is hard to maintain a revenue stream and pay the hundreds of people involved, right, in that process, right? If half the people who use the products only buy a couple of new seats every 10 years, right, the business model isn't going to work, right? And that model has really forced this change. And it does, like Rocco was saying, it brings, that benefit of constantly forcing the developers to come up with newer, better processes and tools for us in order to kind of justify charging us annually for access to their systems. So there really are some good points to these annual subscription models for software licensing. And that's kind of what I want to get into in the next half of the show. Of course, after we let our sponsors for the day get a word in. All right. So stay tuned, folks. We'll be back in just a minute with more of the Cattle Call Podcast. All right, everybody. Today we are our own sponsor. This is Jim and Rocco with ZenTech Consultants. And what do we want to talk to the folks about today, Rocco?
We're going to talk about how to make barbecue meatballs. How does that sound, Jim?
Sounds good to me.
All right. So we're here to talk about our Procore services. We are Procore certified consultants here. So, Jim, what kind of services do we offer?
So when it comes to your Procore software, we're here to help you guys with just about everything you need, from getting it set up, configuring it to your needs, importing your client database and your previous contracts, structuring reports, or even just helping you guys on the daily with the the workflow and the things that you have to do on a regular basis in terms of timesheets and really just about anything from, like we said, setup and configuration all the way through advanced training for all of your staff on how to use Procore in the method and the way that works best for your firm. So, Rocco, if folks need a little bit of help with Procore, how do they reach us?
Yeah, you can reach us. Hit up our website. We have a new website. It's zentechconsultants.net. That's ZENTEK consultants.net. Or give us a call, 866-824-4459. Or drop us an email, sales@zentechconsultants.net.
All right, and if you call now, Rocco will tell you how to make meatballs. All right, folks, we'll talk to you later. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Cattle Call Podcast. We're talking about both the good and the bad of subscription licensing for software in our industry. And in the top half of the show, I hit, I think, most of the negative things that annoy people about the concept. And in this half, I want to be fair and talk about what I see as the good things that come with annual subscriptions. And the very first thing that comes to mind is that, we do tend to get newer, better, smarter tools every year. And look, there may not always be a direct upgrade or benefit for everyone, working in a particular system with each release. But the truth is, the developers need to give us some type of improvement each year in order to keep us paying those fees. Right? Even if the current release doesn't seem to have anything that's of immediate benefit to you, I think you kind of need to see each update as a building block towards better things. Remember that, in its infancy, right? Things like, metadata and property sets, et cetera, that they tied into CAD systems many, many years ago, they were considered useless, right? They were esoteric tools for, veteran CAD geeks like me to use. Nobody else cared. But the truth is that those were actually the foundation of, the BIM concept, right? And the BIM tools that came later on, which were built on top of those. And that's completely changed our industry for the better, right? That BIM concept. And at some level, right? I think everybody who's listening here is involved in the construction world, right? And we all know how things get built, right? Buildings go up one level at a time, right? And the footings have to be excavated and poured and set before anything else can happen. And that's kind of the benefit of the subscription model. It keeps the software companies hustling and developing and putting things out ahead of us, right? So that when it's our turn to step up to the plate, the prep work is already done, and the tools are in place for us with these new design processes and procedures. So Rocco, have you noticed a jump in the speed and the frequency of major design build tools and features being added to software since the advent of these subscription licensing models?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you take a look at just what Autodesk has done, right? I mean, those of you that listen to us regularly, we've had a number of the guys from Autodesk on this podcast, and listen to them talk about some of the advances that's been made, even in Civil 3D alone, right? I mean, there's been pretty significant advancements over the past couple years, and you definitely want to look at. Again, it's not just about buying the tools and then sitting back and doing the same thing every day. I mean, look at the functionality that's been added and look to deploy them, because it's to your point, Jim. I mean, they're building the foundation for the future of where the technology is going, and looking to improve. So I find the same is true with Brixis and with Bluebeam, right? I mean, Bluebeam has made some pretty big changes in their model, right? They're switching from perpetual to annual licensing, and they're adding quite a bit to the product as well. So short answer is yes.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's absolutely the case. I mean, you look at it in terms of speed and functionality, and if you try to resist this, it's going to be like trying to ride a horse down the center of an interstate at rush hour. You are just going to get run over if you try and stay on that old tech. It's just not going to work. And I think another area where the subscription licenses, those annual recurring licenses, bring benefit is on the business end, particularly for bigger companies, right? The truth is, having a fixed fee cost that you can budget for year over year can be a really good benefit, right? Look, no CFO out there likes to get that unexpected comment where it's like, it looks like we're going to have to upgrade this year. That conversation that comes out of left field, particularly, after the annual budget's already been set. It is much easier to start each fiscal year with a known quantity of, we have to buy X number of seats every year, and, that we're going to have to renew, and let's allow for, a 10% growth rate for additional new hires. So we'll get X number of new seats. It's also usually, it's a smaller hit, I guess I'll say, to a company's revenue stream. Even though, look, long term, right, the annual subscriptions add up to, more money. But most big firms would rather spend, $20,000 a year for the next 5 years, right, than to take an $80,000 hit this year. Yeah, mathematically, you're saving 20 grand over 5 years, but it kills your cash flow for this year. And cash flow is a vital part of any business's growth plan, right? If we give out all of our cash this year to buy perpetual licenses, we do not have any money left in-house to hire or expand or, even give people raises, which is something I hear people get from time to time, though, Rocco keeps telling me I don't need one. Thanks,
no
Rocco.
Raise for you.
No raise for you. No soup, no raise. Look, I do understand. Like, I get it. For smaller firms, they'd like to buy a system once and use it for years. But like we talked about in the first half of the show, it's just bad business practice in general. And it's just not really an option that you have anymore for modern AEC software. Rocco, which of the big systems that we work with have gone, we'll call it full subscription or subscription only, and which ones still kind of offer a hybrid or a mix of both perpetual and subscription? Because everybody offers at least some level of subscription.
Yeah, I mean, everybody offers some level of subscription, to your point. I mean, BricsCAD is still available as a perpetual license, but they also offer annual subscriptions. Autodesk obviously is is all annual subscription now. Bluebeam is sort of hybrid, right? But if you're buying Bluebeam brand new now, with the V21 version, the only way to get Bluebeam as a new customer is an annual subscription. If you're running the perpetual licenses still, and you're on V20 with maintenance, you could still add perpetual licenses if you're an existing customer. But again, if you're a brand new Bluebeam customer, the only way to start is V21 annual subscription.
Yeah.
So pretty much everybody's gone in that direction.
Yeah, and I'm sure even the ones who are offering perpetual licenses today, at some point in the next few years, they're going to make that shift. You know it's coming. So there is no dodging this bullet, right? So look, the last big benefit, and I think it's a really, really big benefit that I see for the subscription licensing model, has been its advent into cloud-based licensing. And I really do think that is one of the biggest positive for the end users in this scenario. More and more software companies are just completely shifting away from the traditional concept of local computer-based installs with serial numbers, and installation and licensing processes are moving to cloud-based licensing options with these subscription models. And look, while it is not totally altruistic, right? The cloud licenses are usually what they call named user licenses, meaning that it gives the software developers the chance to kill off their multi-user or shared licensing options. And that means that you can't, hot swap, single users on the same computer anymore, or access pooled licenses anymore. And developers, they're making sure that every person accessing has purchased an active license, right? Which again, it increases their profit line, sure. But I think the benefit here to users like, us and the folks listening is that, we can install the software on an unlimited number of systems. They don't care anymore. Install it as many as you need. And then the licensing is activated by a login through the cloud. And since Rocco brought it up before, I'll use Bluebeam, the new V21 as an example, right? The latest release here moved to a purely cloud-based license. So I actually have right now, I have Review installed on 3 laptops in my house in the office, and I have it on a single desktop, and I also have it on my Surface Pro. I have installed the Bluebeam V21, all of those, right? And I access Bluebeam Studio and Bluebeam Cloud on any friends or family and coworker station whenever I need to, and they all work just fine. I just log in wherever I'm sitting with my Bluebeam ID, and the cloud resolves my subscription, right? And it activates the local installation as long as I'm logged in. And look, now, it's going to limit you to accessing, the software from only one system at a time, right? So that we're not sharing our logins and so on with 30 coworkers. But honestly, that cloud-based licensing, it's a really, really convenient way to be able to work and put the software in a million different places. And it's really only available when you're part of the subscription model process. So Rocco, are there any other benefits that you can think of on using the subscription model versus the perpetual?
Yeah, I think, from the skill set level of an individual, you're an employee or anybody for argument's sake, right? I mean, your resume is always kept current. You're always working with the most current version. You're not 5 years behind and now having to catch up. I think sometimes you look at people's resumes, right, and it's like they were using, even if somebody says I'm familiar with Bluebeam 2017, and if we look at that, we're like, whoa, that was
that's
a while
way back.
So by just being able to list Bluebeam on a resume, for example, and know that you're current, you're up to date with technology, you're not so far behind, is a big selling point for your resume, for your career, for your future growth. And you're not stressing, right? You're not 5 years behind. Oh, how am I going to catch up? You're always with the curve as opposed to being so far behind. So I think that's another added benefit to being current and to being on subscription.
Yeah. And you know what? I actually hadn't even thought of that. I think it's a great point because we've had that conversation with the company owners as well, where we have had company owners who are like, hey, I got this guy. I found him. I said, hey, I want to make you a job offer. And people turn down the job offers because you're working with a system that's, 6 years out of date. I'm not going to get stuck working for a company that's far behind the tech curve because then, like Rocco just said, you wind up being left behind. Now you're not hireable. You get stuck in those positions at those companies. So yeah, business owners, same thing. Your potential employees are not going to want to work with you if you are that far out of date. So I hadn't even thought of that. It's a good point, Rocco. So look, folks, any way you cut it, I think the subscription model is here to stay, and we can't really fight it. So I suggest that we all just kind of move past the anger we had when this all changed and just accept that it is not all bad. Even small firms can benefit from being able to, set a budget and access tools on both home and, work computers. And like Rago said, it's a benefit to employees and employers alike to stay current. In other words, right, you can go back to using things like less expensive desktops and so on, and just duplicate the software on multiple systems without worrying over, I only have one license and it's on one laptop, so I got to go from home to office and I had to install it there. You can go to these cheaper desks. I have 10 of them. It's fine. Don't worry about it. I have one at home, one in your office, one at your girlfriend's, whatever. I don't care. Look, it also makes things, really easy for your IT group, right, to be able to set up ghost images. Right, a single ghost image of a system and just load all the software, everything we use, put it on a ghost, give it to everybody, right? Give it to everybody in the company, the exact same systems, exact same software. And if they have, licenses and logins, they can use the software. If not, they can't. Don't worry about it. It doesn't hurt anything anymore. And I think that eases a lot of the work and headache over, license tracking and having to uninstall and reinstall and go through all these procedures for every piece of software when you're upgrading people. Cloud licensing systems usually have a web-based admin portal where you can, order new licenses, you can assign licenses, and a lot of them are even giving you the ability to track usage, right? So that you can understand, right, who's really using Seats and who isn't. So you can reduce the number of licenses next year if people are just not using it, right? And that can be a huge cost saver as well. All right. So, all right, folks, I will leave it at that for today and we'll get out of here so that, Rocco can head back out to, sunbathing on his spare yacht as he does in these lovely summer months. All right, folks, we are out of here and we'll catch you next time on the Cattle Call Podcast. All right, everybody, today's Cattle Call was brought to you courtesy of Zentech Consultants. That's Rocco and I. Zentech Consultants works with design and manufacturing firms to help our clients purchase and implement the software that they need in these complex industries. We provide a single point of contact for clients to buy, develop, and learn the most vital software systems for your specific needs. Zentech strives to be your trusted technology partner from your initial needs all the way through long-term support and training for your entire staff. So Rocco, why don't you tell them how to reach out to Zentech?
All right, yeah, you can reach out to us through zentechconsultants.net. You can email us at sales@zentechconsultants.net, or you can even call us 866-824-4459.
Excellent. We look forward to hearing from you all.